NASCAR gets a small win over 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. Steve Phelps talks about schedule, ratings, and a little bit of the lawsuit. And Chase Elliott says once again he will not be on the Netflix show. Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. Video gets posted a little bit early today because I am headed to Martinsville for the triple header this weekend. If you see me out at the track, say hello. I'll have a Break Hard hat or shirt on for each race. Tall guy, pretty easy to spot, but if you see me, say hello. It's always fun to talk to people at the racetrack. Getting into today's news though, NASCAR got a small win over 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports when federal judge Frank D. Whitney of Western District of North Carolina denied the request for an expedited discovery from 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. They were looking for 8 documents plus information from 6 key NASCAR executives as well. And the judge in this situation ruled that the scope was too broad, that they were asking for too much information from NASCAR, in the discovery period that they were asking for. He also said that the scope was too broad, that they needed to narrow their scope down. 2311 Racing did argue that they did narrow the scope down in this situation. And what 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports were looking for from this was a lot of information from the 2016 charter agreement as well as the 2025 charter agreement. And they were also asking for information from 6 key NASCAR executives, to which the judge said, no, that's not going to happen. He also cited the fact that the hearing is on Monday, November 4th as well, the day after Sunday's NASCAR Cup Series race at Martinsville, and that there wasn't enough time for the expedited discovery and to also go over all of the information. So that is why he denied the information, or the handing over of the documents that 2311 Racing had requested. 2311 Racing essentially wanted these documents so that they were able to calculate just how much money they will lose next year if they have to operate as an open car versus operating as a chartered car. NASCAR on their side argued those losses are pretty easy to calculate. You don't need all this information for that. And apparently the courts also agreed with NASCAR in this situation because they won't be required to hand over any information to those two teams moving forward. So now we head into Monday, and we could get a decision on that injunction on Monday as well. It's not necessarily something that will happen on Monday, but it could happen on Monday. We could get a decision either way. It could be appealed as well. If it doesn't go in 2311's favor, they could appeal it. If it doesn't go in NASCAR's favor, they can also appeal it. We'll have to wait and see how all of that plays out, but this has to be settled before the lawsuit can continue on. Staying on the topic of NASCAR leadership, NASCAR President Steve Phelps sat down with John Oran over at Puck and talked about a number of different things as we head into the offseason and towards the 2025 season when new media partners will join and everybody will be mad on the internet about it being on different networks, all the fun things. But Steve Phelps had some interesting things to say. John asked him about the future of, the TV package as they move into next season, where it'll be essentially split over 5 different networks versus having just 2 this year. And Steve Phelps is like, yeah, it will be a change for some fans, but he did note that the races from the Xfinity Series on the CW this year, since it made its switch starting back at Bristol earlier this season, are up 15% over the races that were on USA, which isn't necessarily a surprise because one of them is free to air. Essentially, it's a network, so everybody in the country can get it if you have a digital antenna. The other one is a cable network, but it is nice to see that ratings are up 15%. And obviously, some people have had issues with the CW. Trust me, I've seen all the replies to tweets about it, people being angry at it, people being mad at YouTube, Google, Spectrum. Doesn't matter. They're mad at everybody because their local affiliate isn't showing the NASCAR races. And that's partially because this decision was made pretty late and programming was already scheduled. Should be cleared up by February. But the fact that it is up 15% is really good for the Xfinity Series, really good for Xfinity Series teams, and healthy for the sponsors as well, because more eyes are tuning in, which means that they'll be able to hopefully sell more sponsorship, or at least at a higher dollar, and ask for more, and should hopefully maybe make them more competitive and more appealing to sponsors as well. If 15% more people are watching now, that number should go up for next year as well. So that aspect of it is really nice. Now, of course, people are going to be upset about it being on Prime and everything. We talked about that in the video yesterday. You can't please everybody in the world. Everybody will still be mad at something. You'll tell them the grass is green. They'll be like, actually, it's brown. You're like, all right, well, we just watered it. It would be green again. And that would probably be an argument too. So overall, I'm pretty happy with that. When sort of talking about the schedule, John brought up the topic of the Chicago street race, and Steve said something interesting where he said Fox was really excited by the idea of a street race. And obviously it's not in Fox's portion of the schedule and won't be next year either, which has me thinking that Fox would really, really like to have a street race in their portion of the schedule sometime in the future. It'll be interesting to see if that happens, because NASCAR, of course, has flirted with the idea of doing a street race in San Diego. Now, would that be in the second half of the year, potentially even the playoffs, which I think would actually fit really well, or would they consider doing that in the first portion of the season? I think you kind of have to maybe avoid baseball season there, so it could help them out early on in the season by having a street race early in Southern California, because that gets them away from the cold of the Southeast and the Midwest, this portion, the eastern side of the country. So that could be in play there. But I thought it was interesting that Fox was excited about the possibility of a street race on the schedule. Then when talking about the international race that will be happening in 2025 in Mexico, Steve said that he would and suggest that it would not be the last international race on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, which again should not shock a lot of people because I think everybody knows that eventually they're going to end up in Canada, and they should. There's a ton of NASCAR fans in Canada, and I know fans in America are going to be like, now they're getting rid of our races. Listen, you still have, if there are 2 international races on the schedule, you're still going to have 34 opportunities to go to NASCAR Cup Series races. And if you're really upset about it, well, you should have gone to Richmond or whatever the next date is that they're going to take away to potentially send up to Canada or wherever else they may want to go. And then, of course, John had to ask Steve Phelps about the topic of the lawsuit. And obviously Steve can't say very much, which has kind of been NASCAR's MO through this entire thing. They don't comment on ongoing litigation. I do, however, think that the emails coming out between Steve Phelps and 23XI Racing have actually done a better job for NASCAR than a statement probably could have done. And I'm sure NASCAR and some of the people over there have maybe wanted to put out statements, but I don't think you have to in this situation. I think that what those emails have been saying is really the only statement you need to make. But Steve did comment on it and said, obviously, we want a court victory. He said he can't speak to why they brought up this lawsuit because in his eyes, they've negotiated in good faith for the last 2 years. Obviously, that's up for debate. Some fans are going to be on one side. Some fans are going to be on the other side. We're not here to pick sides right now. And then he goes on to say that he wants Michael Jordan involved in the sport, that he thinks it's a good thing that Michael Jordan's involved in the sport. Obviously, he doesn't like the ongoing litigation that is happening, but he said for NASCAR, it's business as usual. They've got races to run. They're still looking at continuing to grow, and they're going to continue to move forward from this, which I think is the perfect response for it. But I like when Steve Phelps comes out and has conversations like this. I think it's a good thing for the sport. If you watch the first season of NASCAR Full Speed on Netflix, their version of Drive to Survive, but better because it's not dramatized and doesn't come up with a bunch of fictional storylines, you would notice there was one glaring driver missing from that, that being Chase Elliott. The sport's most popular driver did not appear in the first season. And listen, Chase Elliott, he's super private about his private life, and I can respect that for sure. But when asked about being in the second season by Matt Weaver over at Sportsnot this week, this is what he had to say.
No.
I don't know what it is about that simple one-word answer, but it kind of just rubs you the wrong way. And granted, like I said, I completely understand his private life. He wants to keep that private. Cool, totally fine with that. But they can still follow him around at the racetrack. And when it comes to being NASCAR's most popular driver, you would think that that driver would maybe want to give back to the sport, to help promote it, to help grow it. I mean, Jeff Gordon understood that. Dale Earnhardt, Tony Stewart, Jimmy Johnson, Dale Earnhardt Jr., all of them understood that. They went on shows. They did some docuseries stuff. Kevin Harvick, obviously, if you guys remember NASCAR 24/7, like all of that stuff was helping grow the sport. And all those guys knew that if you help grow the sport, help promote it, that's eventually going to put money into your pockets. And Chase Elliott doesn't appear to be motivated by that, which is totally fine, like I said. But his refusal, rather, to do anything to help promote the sport outside of just driving the race car is kind of off-putting. Now, he doesn't have to do it, right? He is contracted to drive that race car and do whatever Hendrick Motorsports asks him to do, and they're not asking him to be on this docuseries. Again, I completely understand that. I know there's going to be comments that are like, he doesn't have to do this. He's doing what he wants to do. I get it. I'm saying that. I understand that. The problem here is if you're the most popular driver, you would think that like you would want to be out in front and kind of being the face of the sport, promoting to your fans, giving people kind of a glimpse. And they don't have to come into your home. Like the Netflix show doesn't have to go to your house and follow you around and see your girlfriend and hang out with you at the lake and go, to your airport and everything. They don't have to do that. They can just see you at the racetrack, which I think would be totally fine, because honestly, that's all I really care about is what's happening at the racetrack. For most of the docuseries last year, you saw a little bit of some people's home life, like Joey Logano had a scene at home, Kyle Larson had a scene at home, others had maybe a little bit more than what some did. But you don't have to let them into your house. You can just have them follow you around at the racetrack, which I think would be really entertaining. And having seen how they operate at the Roval just a couple weeks ago, that being the Netflix crew, they're pretty out of the way and they're really respectful in terms of like when they come up to ask if they can film for, a certain driver or whatever, they clear it with the PR guy or girl. And then if that's not around, then they maybe ask a different team member. And at most times they're like, yeah, just kind of stay in the background. And that's what they do. They hang out in the vicinity, but they're not like right up in their face. And then at times they'll get the no, not right now type of thing. And they're like, all right, cool. Turn around and they go wait back, in the corner for a minute and, wait for that opportunity to come back. I didn't see anything that was like, bam, right in your face. We're forcing our way in here. Maybe some of them didn't necessarily know which drivers they were going to, but that's a topic for a different day. But for Chase Elliott, I guess I just keep coming back to the most popular driver thing. He has the most fans, right? He got all of his dad's fans. He got all of his other dad's fans and Dale Earnhardt Jr. And then he got a lot of Jeff Gordon fans all together to create this trifecta of fans that kind of just support this guy that he likes his fans. Don't get me wrong. And Chase Elliott has a personality. But one thing you can say about Chase Elliott, he was not the personality hire over at Hendrick Motorsports. And that's fine. But you would just like to see him do an ounce, a sliver, just a little bit to help promote the sport. I mean, he is a past champion. He's probably going to win most popular driver again this year, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. He has his own merch trailer, in the fan zone. Not any driver can say that outside of Chase Elliott. So you would just like to see him do a little bit more. And being on the Netflix show would certainly help, with that. Obviously, he has a strong chance of getting eliminated this weekend at Martinsville, and maybe he thinks that the cameras being around, even just in the vicinity, is a distraction. Okay, fine, if that's really what you want to go to. But when you just look back at sort of when NASCAR was at its most popular, or even on the starting of the decline, drivers went out and did a lot, and now we're getting drivers being like, no, not doing that, not doing a streaming or doing a docuseries on the biggest streaming platform in the entire world. Yeah, no, that would be a dumb thing to do to help try to promote the sport. I don't know, kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Interested to hear what people have to say about it. But let me know in the comments what you think about what NASCAR's small win over 2311 Racing for our Motorsports, what Steve Phelps had to say, and then Chase Elliott, once again, not participating in the Netflix doc. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok at BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at BreakHardBlog.